Thanks for checking out this video. If you're just starting or even thinking about starting a career in web development, you're in the right place. I upload new videos every week. Hit subscribe and the bell to get notified. So let's take a look at the difference between a regular function that has been around since the beginning of JavaScript and the arrow function that was introduced in JavaScript ES6. So this is a regular function and it's returning the string hello world. And so when we console log message, we should see hello world in the console. So let me save this. And there we go. We see hello world in the console. So the first thing about arrow functions is that they are anonymous functions. So in order to turn this into an arrow function, we'll have to assign it to a variable. So we'll say let message equal, and then we use parentheses and then equal greater than sign. That creates the arrow. And then we can return hello world. So if I comment this one out and I hit save, we should still see hello world. Now in here we are explicitly returning the string. So with an arrow function, we can also implicitly return the string. So since we have just one line and we're just returning one string here, we can actually get rid of the curly braces and the return statement. And we could run it like this. There we go. Hit save and we still have hello world. So this is implicitly returning whatever we put after the arrow. Okay, so now what if we have an argument in our function? So here in message, we're now passing a value here and we are returning that in the string here. So in order to turn this into an arrow function, again, we'll need to assign it to a variable. So we'll say let message equal, and this time in the parentheses, just add the a there. Equal sign greater than, and again, instead of doing the curly braces, we can just go ahead and return the string that we're looking for. Just like that. And now when we console log and call the function, we're going to pass it a value. And this value will then get put into the string. So let me comment this one out, and now we'll save it. And there we see hello John. And now since we're only passing one value, we actually don't have to have the parentheses here. We could just say let message a arrow function and then the string. So if I save this, you'll see that we still get the same result. Now if we're passing two arguments, so let's say A and B, in this case we will have to have parentheses surrounding these. Let's change this to one of our variables. We'll say A and B. We'll just put them together in a string there. Now in our message here, I can add another string. We'll say hello and John, and I'll add an exclamation so that we can see the difference at the bottom, and I'll save that. And there we see hello John. So those first examples, we were converting named functions into arrow functions. And in this one, we're going to convert an anonymous function into an arrow function. So we have an event listener here listening for the click function, and then we're going to console log click. So in order to change this to an arrow function, it's pretty simple. Just remove the function, and then after the parentheses, we'll put our arrow. Just like that. Now, since we only have one line in here, we can remove the curly braces as well. And this would be the same thing. So we have our event listener here, and then after that we have our function here. So here's another example of an anonymous function. So we have an array here of objects with a first and last name in each, and we're console logging people.map, and then we have our anonymous function here. We're passing person and returning person.firstname. So if I save this, we'll see that it returns an array of the first names from the people array. So in order to turn this into an arrow function, we'll remove function, and then we'll put our arrow, and this would work just fine just like this. We could also remove the parentheses around person since we just have one value here, and since we're just returning one line, we could also remove the curly braces and the return, and this would work just the same. So let's change this to last name, and then I'll save this. And now we have the last names. So you can see how arrow functions make your code so much shorter and more concise and actually easier to read. So one of the most important things to understand about the differences between a regular function and an arrow function is the way that they handle this. So a regular function rebinds the this to the object that called it. So it could be the window, the document, a button. So let's see what that looks like. So here we have a regular function demo, and it's console logging this. So this should log an object. We're going to add an event listener to the load and call the function from window add event listener. And then we're targeting the button that we have here, and we're adding the event listener and calling the function again on click. So now let's see what objects are binding to this. Let me save this. And as expected, window would be called when the window is loaded. Now when we click the button, this is now rebinding to the object that called it. So now if we change this to an arrow function, let's see what happens. We can get rid of all of that. And now let's see what happens. We get window again, as expected, on the window event listener. Now let's see what happens when we click the button. We get window again. So arrow functions do not rebind this. So to better demonstrate this, we have a function here called stopwatch. And we're calling this.time would start at 0. And we're setting an interval with a regular function. And we're calling again this.time++. We want to iterate that and then log the current time. And we're doing that every 1000 milliseconds, which is every second. And then we're creating our timer, which equals a new stopwatch. All right, let me save that. And you'll see that we're getting some errors. It's not working. So that is because when we call this regular function, it's rebinding the this. So in order to get around this issue with a regular function, some have created a variable. So we'll say let self equal this, and then instead of using this throughout, they change it to self. So now we're assigning this to a variable, and then that variable, of course, is going to work properly down the line. So now if we save this, you'll see that it actually works. So instead of doing all of this, we could change this function here to an arrow function. So let's go ahead and get rid of what we did just a minute ago. Control Z there, change these back to this, and get rid of the self. All right, and so then let's change this to an arrow function. And since we have multiple lines here, we do have to keep the curly braces. And so let's run this arrow function. And we'll see that it works right off. So since it's not rebinding this, it's still the same as this up here. So another thing that we have to be careful with arrow functions is if we're just returning an object. So this is a proper object, curly braces, and then we have a key of name and a value of John. But the arrow function sees this curly brace and it's expecting some expression here. And so it's going to try to parse the inside of the curly braces as a normal function would. So if we're returning an object, we have to wrap it in parentheses. And this would work just fine. And the last thing that I want to point out is that if we're using an arrow function in one line, we can't have any line breaks. So if I try to run this, we're going to get an error. Unexpected token. It's not sure what to do with it. So we have to put this back in one line, and now it will work just fine. Alright, so before you go, if you liked this video, a thumbs up is appreciated.